Is the internet broken? Has social media and the rise of AI and bots given us a post-truth society? Can TikTok be saved? We're going to attempt to answer several of these questions and more on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Tamika Tillemann. He is the president of Project Liberty, a nonprofit organization looking to build solutions to help people take back control of their digital lives. Welcome to the show, Tamika.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
We got a lot of different topics that I want to cover on the show, so we're going to kind of set it up with some background a little bit first and then get into the meat of the episode probably about halfway through. But, you know, it's all good content, so trust us if you're watching. So I want to ask, first of all, how do you feel about the level of data privacy that maybe today's citizens have compared to 5, 10, 20, or even 30 years ago? Are we seeing that it's either getting better or worse when it comes to privacy data, people's control over or their perceptions of the internet? A lot to unpack there, but what's your general feeling of where we're going or where we've been?
I think the best way to answer this question may be with an analogy from our founder of Project Liberty, Frank McCourt. And he came out with a book earlier this year in which he poses the following hypothetical. If I was the postmaster and I came to you and I said, I've got a deal, I'm going to deliver the mail for free, no more stamps. You'd say, okay, well, that's interesting, but what's involved in this? What are the parameters?
Yeah.
And I'd come back to you first and I'd say, well, we're going to put a listening device in every single room of your house, in your car, in your office, and that's part one. We're going to know everything that you're saying and everything that you're talking about all the time. You'd say, well, that's a little bit creepy. I'm not sure I'm on board with that. And then the next piece of the puzzle to make this no stamp deal work as the postmaster would be that anything you send through the mail, so all of your ideas, all of your thoughts, all of your relationships, all of that content, I'm going to have access to that, and that's going to belong to me. I can repurpose that and use it however I see fit. And you'd say, well, that doesn't seem quite fair to go with that approach. I may have some concerns on that front. And then the last piece of this, again, if I'm the postmaster, I'd say, I'm going to go to your teenage daughter's diary, and I'm going to read that diary, and anything that she's feeling insecure about, maybe she's worried about her weight, maybe she's worried about something else, I'm going to push her content that's going to make her feel worse about that. And then I'm going to sell her stuff based on those insecurities. And you say, well, that's, just wrong. That's right. Really, an awful thing to do. And yet, for practical purposes, that's kind of where we are in the way the internet is functioning right now. We have these unappointed postmasters who have set up shop, who have created virtually ubiquitous surveillance infrastructure that monitors everything we see, everything we say, and in many cases, they know us much better than we know ourselves. And then they use that information for a wide array of purposes, most recently AI training, but there are a lot of other things that folks are utilizing it for. And in too many instances, they are taking that access and that knowledge and leveraging it in ways that may be commercially productive for them, but are incredibly damaging to our kids. So this is a very bad system that has evolved, a lot of it accidentally and unintentionally. But now that we know what's going on, it is certainly incumbent on us to fix what's broken and hopefully move us to a better internet in the future.
If we've made that decision, or the idea is that things are worse than it used to be, could you pinpoint when it all started to go wrong? Was there a single episode or an incident over the last 20, 30 years? Whether it was, maybe it was, this all started after 9/11, everything was fine until after that, or everything was fine until Facebook came around, everything was fine until Twitter came around, or is it more like this is just a gradual slow burn and we're all that frog in the proverbial pot of water, it's just slowly boiling us alive and we're not realizing it until it's too late?
Well, there's certainly a lot of frog boiling involved in this whole enterprise. I think what has become clear is that in the early days of the internet was largely decentralized, largely democratized. People had control over their own information. The internet was powered largely by open source protocols, and there was a great deal of dynamism and a great deal of agency that came along with that because individuals were in the driver's seat. And along the way, as platforms became bigger and ultimately embraced a business model that involved aggregating personal information and then using that private information to manipulate behavior for profit, we got off the rails. And it's tough to put a precise date on when that moment occurred, but there certainly were a couple of key junctures around the decision to monetize engagement. At Facebook, there were a couple of key junctures with other platforms that decided to use as much data as they could possibly get their hands on to draw inferences about each of us and then use those inferences as the basis for trying to get us to do things that they wanted us to do.
Right.
Where things just, again, went in a pretty bad direction. And there's not a ton of debate about that anymore. I think there's largely recognition among at least knowledgeable observers around what's going on. What we need to do very quickly in our minds is pivot from admiring the problem, which has taken up a lot of the conversation over the last couple of years, and start deploying the solutions. And fortunately, we think they're good solutions. We've built some of them, but we don't have to accept the status quo. We can fix this, and we know how.
Okay, so and I think we're going to get to that too. But do you ever run across anybody that when talking about the internet or talking about a lot of these issues and these platforms that are out there, do you hear anybody saying, "Oh no, everything's fine," or we're just overreacting? It's all of you doomsayers that are, social media isn't as bad as everyone says it is, or do you get more of the people, actually thinking about this for a while and going, "Yeah, we have a problem"?
It's interesting. Project Liberty now is 5 years old. So as an organization, we've been at this for a while. And when these conversations launched 5 years ago, you would occasionally get that response.
Okay.
There were folks, including pretty sophisticated observers, who would just say, "I'm not sure what the problem is here. Things seem to be working relatively well." And that has changed pretty dramatically over the last couple of years. And in the course of 2024, Frank McCourt and I have met, I've lost precise count, but I think with over 60 key elected officials in the United States spanning the political spectrum. So kind of across the full gamut. I don't think a single one of them has pushed back on the assertions that we're making. So we're at a point now where, again, at least among people who are paying attention, there is very broad acknowledgement and understanding of the challenges that we're talking about.
And within that last 5 years, there was this big global pandemic that occurred, 2019, 2020, 2021. Maybe did that accelerate a lot of the problems that we're seeing, or was it always there in the background simmering before this happened, and maybe people just want to make an easy target to blame?
Well, if you will, come with me on a slight digression for a moment.
Sure. You got all the time in the world, Tamika. Go ahead.
If you zoom way out, the best analog that I have found for what we are dealing with right now is the historical paradigm of feudalism. And, again, this sounds like it was a long time ago and that it's not super relevant. But 500 years ago today, my 17th great-grandfather, who was a guy named Hugh Broster, woke up in a town called Cheshire, England. And all of his neighbors were serfs. They operated in a landscape where they didn't control the fields that they cultivated. Those were owned by somebody else. And they sent most of the produce that they generated up to manor houses. And it was great. It was a great system if you were sitting in the manor house. It was a really lousy system for everybody else.
Yeah.
And, we are at a point right now where in this period, there was a big pandemic, and the pandemic dramatically reshaped the understanding of the value of labor at the time. And within Hugh Broster's lifetime, you saw the end of the feudal system. And people ended up with a whole lot more rights. They had agency, and they had the ability to control their lives in ways that they didn't have previously. And in a weird way, I think we have gotten to a point where, while again, it may sound very different, each of us wakes up every morning, we take out the modern equivalent of farming implements, our phones, and we go to work creating valuable produce that we send up, data that we send up to manor houses in Silicon Valley and Seattle. And in the course of the pandemic, we learned a lot about how data is valuable. And we saw this in many different ways at many different levels. And I think people have started to awaken to the fact that we are trapped in a neo-feudal system that just isn't working for us. It may be working for a few people, but it's not working for the rest of us.
Okay. Yeah, because again, along that same front, do you think that we have been distracted by a lot of the shiny objects of the good parts of the technology world? Whether it was reconnecting with friends from high school, college, even giving people a voice. For example, this podcast between you and I don't think I would have ever met you if it wasn't for the fact that YouTube, existed and democratized a lot of the technology to allow people to talk one-on-one like this and then broadcast it to the world. For me as a journalist, I grew up in the pre-internet days of print journalism. If you were going to be a broadcaster at any point, you'd have to work for one of the three major networks and work your way up that way. And because of that, we're now seeing a world where anybody with a camera, can become a quote unquote influencer. So there is some good that happens out of this technology too, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, to be clear, Project Liberty is a massively pro-tech project. I'm a massively pro-tech guy. Frank is a massively pro-tech guy.
Yeah.
We just want it to work right. And we want it to work in a way that's going to allow communities and families and individuals to realize the benefits of these technologies and not give up what makes us human along the way. Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter, gave a really important speech in Oslo over the summer where he said, we're focusing right now far too much on the loss of free speech and not nearly enough on the loss of free will. Mm-hmm. And there is a real risk right now with the way this technology is being utilized. Again, these platforms know us better than we know ourselves. They know how to trigger us. They know how to manipulate us, that we lose the ability to make decisions, the free will and the free agency that makes us human, without even realizing it as this all kind of continues on its current trajectory. So we want to fix that problem. Once we fix that problem, the tech is awesome.
Yeah.
And it obviously has the potential to deliver massive benefits in our lives if it's used properly.
It brings me back to my philosophy class in college about free will versus what's the other one? Like you either have free will or fate, fate versus free will.
Yeah.
So before we get into what Project Liberty is proposing for a lot of these different things, people have suggested this before. I've seen a lot of other quote unquote fix the internet movements, and I think one of them was Web3. Maybe just like, bring back the internet to the way it was with academics only or open source only, and you would have no business commercial interests on that. I've seen like things thinking that the metaverse is going to be the thing that will free us all. We can't really go back to something like that, correct? Or what went wrong with some of these movements that you've seen over the past few years?
Well, it's a great question, and I'd suggest two things that we need to be conscious of as we put the current moment in context. The first is that this is a lot like human migration in some ways, and people will stay in really bad places for a long time unless and until they are given a meaningful alternative.
Okay.
And I think about my family members who came to the United States. I know that there are many others who have had similar experiences and could tell similar stories. But again, during World War II, most of my family in Europe was wiped out, and the ones who survived recognized that they didn't want to stick around anymore. They wanted to go someplace else. And so you need two dynamics. You need first a situation where people decide the status quo is neither desirable nor sustainable. And then you need someplace to go. You need an alternative. And up until now, I don't think people necessarily understood that the status quo was as broken as it is. I think that realization has started to seep in. And we certainly didn't have meaningful alternatives. We didn't have a good destination for people who were tired of the system as it is presently working.
Yeah.
Again, I think that's changing now. We're starting to see the alternative emerge. We're starting to see the recognition of the problem emerge. And for that reason, when you put those two elements together, I'm hopeful about where the future leads.
It's almost like, people won't make a jump to the alternative unless they see, like, if they're on a boat and it's hit an iceberg, then, is there something?
We're getting off that boat.
Yeah, they're going to get off the boat if they see that it's sinking. But there are lots of others that people are like, well, the boat's not sinking, but I have a really bad feeling, so I'll go first. But, for the most part, are we heading towards like a Titanic level incident with the internet, or is it just going to be like we're just slowly sinking, and it's too late? Once we're underwater, well, then we'll know.
Without jumping too far ahead, we have developed technology that's designed to give people back control over their lives.
Yeah.
And to go back to your last question, a lot of that effort was built around conversations that our founder and others have had with individuals who built the first generations of the internet. And and I've been fortunate to take part in a lot of these conversations as well. You go and you sit down with Tim Berners-Lee, and you go and you sit down with people like Dave Clark, who, Tim developed, of course, HTTP, the protocol that connected data. People like Dave Clark helped develop TCP/IP, the protocol that initially connected machines. And what they will tell you is that we are asking the internet to do a lot of things today that it was never intended to do.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that is that you've got a system that is not functioning properly because it's just not built to do the things that it's supposed to do. And you need to address some of those foundational problems at the infrastructure level. If you do that, we can fix this. This is just engineering. So, if there's one thing that folks listening to this conversation take away, I hope it's the fact that this is a solvable problem. We don't need to be content with the level of dysfunction that currently exists on the internet. This stuff can be rebuilt and it can be repaired, and we and others are working hard to do that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't fix itself.
Yeah.
You got to solve these problems with intention, and you have to do it ideally in a way that brings a lot of people to the table.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to do at Project Liberty.
All right. And so one of the things that you're proposing is this decentralized social networking protocol, correct? The DSNP?
That's correct.
Is this the primary thing that will help drive this, or is this just one of the major parts of the entire plan?
We think it's one piece of it's a really important piece, but it's one piece of a broader effort. And I'll say two things about the bigger context, and then talk a little bit about DSNP. This is not fixing the internet is too big for any one organization or any one individual to do on their own. So this is not something that Project Liberty or anyone else is going to be able to tackle successfully by themselves. The flip side of that, and this is the second piece, is that we do believe that if you get the right community around this, it can be done, and can be done relatively quickly. I grew up in Colorado. The co-creator of DSNP also grew up in the mountains, and he likes to talk about this. This is Braxton Woodham, in terms of a quilting party. And on the frontier, large pieces of cloth were very expensive. And so if you wanted to make it through the winter, you'd get together with your neighbors, everybody would bring a little piece of cloth, and then you would together stitch those pieces of cloth into something that was going to keep you warm when the weather got cold. And that's how you were able to settle the frontier. We think the technology story around fixing the internet is going to look a lot like that.
Okay.
We're all going to have to are pieces of cloth, and DSNP is an important piece of cloth in that regard. And then we're going to have to stitch those into an alternative that's going to help us settle the digital frontier in a better and healthier way.
All right.
And what we see with DSNP is the potential. It's a protocol that's designed to put people in charge of their digital lives. It gives you control over your information and your social graph that would otherwise be held by the big platforms. It allows you to seamlessly move that information, including your relationships and the followers you have or the friends you have on a platform, across different platforms. So the platforms need to treat you right, because if they don't treat you right, you go someplace else. And it facilitates interoperability and publishing across many, many different platforms as it relates to the content that we generate online. So you can decide where you're sharing it and on what terms. And right now we have this, again, very dysfunctional system where pretty mindlessly, and many of us have been guilty of this, I think virtually all of us have been guilty of this, we click on terms of service because that's the only way to access the platforms that we need to access to live our lives. In the future, we think in an upgraded internet, the apps are going to click on our terms of service, not the other way around. And we can get the power dynamics back where they belong, and ideally have an internet that's going to work much better for everyone, including the commercial side of the internet. And we think there's an important commercial opportunity here as part of this.
Okay. And does this require that every person that belongs to this protocol has to identify themselves as that person? Like, I guess my next question was, does this allow for people to be anonymous with each other? Because there's an issue about the whole anonymity thing, right?
You have an identity, and you can decide how much of that identity you want to share as you're interacting with others. And so, in some cases, if you are completing I'll give you one example. We've done a lot of work with the country of Estonia, and the president of Estonia, former president of Estonia, Toomas Ilves, who built out that country's digital infrastructure, has been a good friend of Project Liberty. And Estonia, for folks who don't know, is a little country, but it's widely regarded as having the best digital infrastructure stack on the planet. And in Estonia, you can do just about everything you would want to do online, including getting married. The only thing I think you can't do online right now is get a divorce. Okay. So you have to go in to get a divorce. But other than that, you can do just about anything you'd want to do online. But you decide what type of information you're sharing and in what context. And DSNP facilitates similar functionality. So in many cases, you may want to share no information at all about who you are. In other cases, you may want to share a little bit of information, but you don't have to share everything the way we tend to operate right now.
Okay.
And so there is, in our mind, an opportunity to live our digital lives in much the same way that we used to live our analog lives. And in an analog world, my wife knows a whole lot about me, and that's okay with me. I'm fine with her knowing just about everything that I'm doing.
Right.
But folks on the street who I would not grant that same level of access. And so you can decide and calibrate how you are living your online life and share information in a way that's going to be mutually beneficial, we think, for everyone involved.
Can you give us like a quick example of how good, what would good look like in the context of what we currently do? Like, if you walk me through just a couple of different interactions with other companies or platforms.
I rented a car a few days ago, and when you rent a car right now, you have to give up an enormous amount of information. You're giving up not just your home address and your driver's license number, but you're giving up your date of birth, you're giving up your eye color, you're giving up your height, a whole lot of other very precise details because they're taking all of that from your driver's license. At the end of the day, they really only need to know two things. They need to know that you're over 25, and they need to know that you have a valid driver's license. So in this new world, we think there should be ways to authenticate the fact that A, you're over 25, and B, you have a valid driver's license, and then you should be able to rent a car. And there's no reason why the clerk at the rental car company, who may be a good person or maybe they may be a really lousy person, needs access to all of your personal details,
Right.
certainly enough to engage in the type of identity theft that has become so commonplace without a very good justification for doing so. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think again, allowing the individual to make the choice of what details. I'm not sure if everybody would get down to that level of granular detail for each interaction that they have, but maybe they will once they see the benefits of doing so. Correct? Like,
well, and the reality in a case like this is obviously nobody wants to spend all day making all of these decisions.
Yeah.
And so we anticipate that there will be frameworks that are made available. We do a lot of work, for example, with Consumer Reports. And Consumer Reports is a good independent organization that, if they're working on something, they're going to spend a lot of time to figure out the responsible path forward.
Yeah.
If Consumer Reports came out with a data framework for how to use my data, I'd probably say, you know what, that's probably pretty close to what I'm going to be comfortable with.
Okay.
And there may be others out there who are going to have similar approaches. So people will be able to choose how they can, obviously do this on a very granular level if they want to, but in most cases, people are not going to do it on a super granular level. They're going to choose one of the options that are available, and then they're going to be good, thoughtful people who are looking out for individuals' interests, who are designing those frameworks and ensuring that they're kept up to date.
Yeah. Is there a way that we can move towards this infrastructure while still having our foot in the existing infrastructure, or do you
Absolutely.
need? It's almost like with the autonomous car argument. Like there are autonomous cars right now, but everybody that I talked to in the autonomous car space said we could have this right now if everybody just gave up driving. And if we banned everybody from actually human driving and then gave them an autonomous car, we would have that future that we're all looking at. So in a similar vein, can we have the Project Liberty DNSP model or does everybody have to move over? And then I guess the next question is, how many companies do you need to support this, or platforms to support this to really start getting momentum?
So I just pulled up the numbers. We have 1.4 million people who have come on, over 1.4 million people who have come on to the platform since we launched it earlier this year.
Okay.
As I'm talking with you, I'm watching those numbers go up. So, the numbers are increasing on a very regular basis. We just announced a series of new partnerships with 5 new projects and apps that are moving onto this infrastructure. We think those numbers are going to increase pretty dramatically over the course of the coming year. And as your viewers may be aware, we have also launched a bid for TikTok, the US asset of TikTok. And in the event that we are successful with that bid, and at the moment we are widely acknowledged to be the lead bidder, but in the event ByteDance decides to move forward with a sale, our stated ambition and expectation is to move the 170 million US users of TikTok onto this new infrastructure, give them control of their data, transform TikTok into the internet's most trusted steward of data. And at that point, you're operating with real scale, and we would have the cornerstone of an upgraded web where people are in control of their identity.
Right.
So we see a number of pathways forward. TikTok is neither the only nor the largest partner that we are in discussions with right now. But our short assumption, make a long story short, is that there will be a lot of people using this technology in the future, and it won't preclude you from using the existing internet. But given the option, I think most of us are going to choose an internet where we're in charge and where we have agency over our choices and information.
It almost feels like I'd want to have a new company coming in and replicating all of these other things from the old internet, because I'm not sure if I would trust the existing companies to come over to this platform, because I always feel like they would be like, well, I'm holding, I've got my fingers crossed and they're behind my back so you can't really see it. And then it's almost like, trust me again. It's like, well, why don't I just start with someone who I might trust before all of you other, these other companies move over. Do you have a preference, or do you not care one way or the other? Because you could probably tell if they're keeping their fingers crossed behind their back, right?
The beauty of this solution is it operates at the infrastructure level. So, it sits alongside TCP/IP and HTTP in the stack. It's pretty deep in the stack. And so it's really hard, you can't cheat if you're using this infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's something that is at an engineering level just built differently from the way the internet operates today. The other component of that is we think it's going to be critical to shift from the current attention-based model of the internet, the attention-based economy that we have on the internet, to an intention-based economy. And what I mean by that is right now, most of the big platforms are focused on capturing as much of our attention as possible, making the content that they serve us as sticky as possible, if you're being diplomatic, as addictive as possible, if you're being a little bit more blunt, and then monetizing our eyeballs as best they're able as we're stuck staring at this content. We think that there is a real opportunity to shift over to a model where people are intentionally and affirmatively identifying the type of content, experiences, goods, and services that they would like to learn more about and engage with, and then allowing individuals to curate their own content feeds on the basis of those expressed intentions. And two things happen when you do that. The first is it is a much better and healthier experience for individuals, because rather than just staring at car crashes all day, you're actually able to articulate what you want your life to be like and the type of content you think that's going to help you build that life. And that turns out to be much better, healthier content than just whatever is going to tickle our lizard brain, which is the way the internet is functioning at the moment. And then the second piece of this is it's actually much better for brands and advertisers as well, because stated intention is a much better prediction of what you're actually going to do with your spending power than inference, which is the way the internet is operating today. So we think this is both the right thing to do, and it's certainly a lot better than the existing system. We think it's also the smart thing to do. And ultimately, our assumption is that platforms are going to recognize this either because they have to for competitive reasons, or they're going to go the way of the dinosaurs and end up extinct when they're confronted with a superior model.
Yeah, all right, I don't know if you can answer this question the way that I'm hoping you can, but currently, so we're in the holiday season right now. And, when I go on to an online site to look for something, I'm like, oh, I've got to buy my wife a gift. And I know what she likes. But when I go to Amazon, it's just I just end up browsing a lot, and I just because the algorithm is like, here's all of the things you've looked at before, and I was like, well, if I did that, I'm always looking for something new and different and unique, and I don't feel like the algorithm actually gets me to that point. Is within this new platform, is there still a way for companies or platforms to surprise me with things that I might not have realized I wanted to see, or something like that, whether it's a product or a news feed or a funny video, right?
Absolutely. And, the infrastructure that we've created, and, it is expressed in a decentralized infrastructure layer called Frequency, which we think is going to be the foundation for a lot of this upgraded internet that we are describing, still allows for a lot of that spontaneity and a lot of that discovery. So there's nothing about the way the infrastructure of this internet operates that would preclude that. But it does ensure that those interactions are taking place on your terms, and that you're not being unknowingly manipulated, which is the way that the internet in too many cases is operating right now.
Right. For example, on my Instagram feed, I've watched enough videos of dogs because I have a dog and I have a beagle, so I get a lot of beagle videos. But every now and then it's like, well, I enjoy watching cat videos too, But like the algorithm doesn't know that. The algorithm just goes, oh, well, I'm just going to keep feeding them. I'm going to keep feeding Keith these videos instead of maybe, or a random horse video or something that of someone falling down that might be funny, or, again, it's almost like the algorithm is directing me one way, and I don't like that. I like being surprised. So I'm wondering if that will come back. But that's not very helpful for a lot of the people that want to sell me stuff either, right?
We've spent a lot of time with Jay Graber at Blue Sky, and what they're doing is really interesting in this regard. They have a marketplace of 55,000 algorithms, and people can choose their own algorithms. They can assemble them like Legos. They can make new algorithms if they want to make new algorithms. But those open source transparent algorithms allow you to assemble an experience that's going to be a lot like what you would want. Okay. So if you want to layer in the cat algorithm to the Beagle algorithm, nothing to prevent you from doing that. And you can make that change anytime. But we think that ideally we should be in charge of that process as individuals. It shouldn't be something that's inflicted on us by some unknowing, unseen force.
Right. All right. So I want to get back to the people's bid for TikTok, which you guys are involved in. The recent decision that was made by the appeals court judge, does that help you in your bid, or is it just kicking the can down the road, and the ultimate decision will still be probably up to ByteDance, correct?
This was a very good decision for the people's bid for TikTok, and there have actually been two very good decisions in the last couple of days. We had one decision that was a unanimous decision from three judges with very different ideological viewpoints, all of whom upheld the legislation that Congress passed in April, which mandated either a sale or a closure of TikTok by January 19th. And then the other decision, which just came out a few days ago on Friday, upheld or it declined to stay this decision until after January 19th.
Okay.
So this is something that's moving and moving pretty quickly. The only potential source of further delay right now is the prospect of a successful appeal to the Supreme Court. It's unclear whether the Supreme Court takes this case because, again, the appeals court, in a very decisive way, answered all of the constitutional claims that were involved in ByteDance's argument. And it's not clear that there is any reason for the Supreme Court to take this up, given that there are not significant outstanding constitutional questions. So we believe that, one way or another, there is very likely to be either a shutdown of the platform, and we've done a lot of planning to be ready for that contingency, or a sale. And we're focused primarily on a sale and ensuring that we are ready in the event that ByteDance decides to move forward with a transaction.
Right.
We've aggregated an enormous amount of capital. We have tech that's ready to go, a clean stack. We can pass a vetting by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, which is important. And we're not an antitrust risk, and we can do it all without the existing TikTok algorithm.
Okay.
So there are very few entities that are set up to actually execute a transaction in the event that ByteDance decides to move forward. Again, at the moment, we're in pole position to do that.
Okay, that is really good news. And the other issue that was surrounding a lot of this was the election, and with the change in administration, does that open up other avenues or other thoughts about, well, would President Trump decide not to go forward with this, or it feels like most of the people we've talked to is that it's still going to go through because you had bipartisan support on both sides. And plus, a lot of the people that have been advising the reason why TikTok is dangerous, not only from a national security standpoint, but also from the mental health side of things, would make the president go, yeah, okay, we're still okay with this.
Well, President Trump, who signed the original executive order that started this whole process, that identified the potential national security challenges around ByteDance's ownership of TikTok, has said that he doesn't want to see the platform shut down, and we absolutely agree with him. We think that it shouldn't be shut down. but the way to shut it down and address the national security concerns that he and his national security advisor and his incoming Secretary of State have all highlighted is to move forward with a sale.
Yeah.
So we think a sale is the path forward, the correct path forward, and we're very hopeful that he and others in his administration will facilitate that outcome as I think many people try to ensure that we don't simply perpetuate the status quo, which is, again, neither desirable nor sustainable.
Right. And I think also with the new administration seem to be open to more of these other concepts that you're talking about with, giving end users more control over their data privacy. Because you also did see a lot of big tech people move into political positions of power. Elon Musk is out there doing his thing, and Vivek Ramaswamy, he's doing his thing as well. So you're seeing a lot of Silicon Valley vets also move to the right as well. But do you think that might help, or is that going to they're just shuffling chairs?
Well, in our experience, there is very widespread concern about the concentration of power that exists within the existing big tech incumbents.
Yeah.
And something needs to change there, and we think something is going to change.
Okay.
So we look forward to collaborating with a wide array of partners to create that change. But again, it's time to fix this. We can't simply kick the can down the road any further, to use your phrase.
Yeah.
It's time to build something better.
And there is something that's going to swallow the can in the future, and that's AI. When you think about the rise of generative AI and a lot of those issues, it feels like we have to do this before AI then takes over with this internet. I also want to call it internet rot. I mean, I think brain rot was one of the words of the year this year. But it definitely feels like, you're never going to fix the internet if the AI people get in charge, right? Or if the AI infrastructure then suddenly takes hold of this infrastructure, right?
Well, again, Frank McCourt, who's our founder, is an infrastructure guy, and what he says all the time is the solution to having a really bad infrastructure system is not to make it more powerful.
Right.
So, if you have a water network that's delivering polluted water to people, or if you have an electrical network that's engaged in brownouts or electrocuting people all the time, you fix it first. And once you fix it, then you can make it bigger. We think it's critical to address the deficiencies, the known deficiencies that exist in our current tech stack before we make it more powerful. And specifically, we need to ensure that we have a tech stack that aligns with our values.
Yeah.
Because right now, we have a tech stack that's built on one set of values that are focused on centralization and surveillance and opacity and a bunch of other things. And we have a society and a set of institutions that are nominally built on a very different set of values around decentralization of power and accountability and transparency. And one of two things is going to happen. Either the institutions are going to bend to become more like that tech stack, and unfortunately that's a real prospect right now, or you're going to see the tech shift and become better grounded in our values. And we think that's the outcome we need to be pursuing.
All right. If people agree with you on this, where should they go for more details and get involved in this and help support this new protocol and this new way of thinking? What are some sites that they should go to?
So two things. First, they should visit thepeoplesbid.com, which is where we talk about the People's Bid for TikTok.
Yep.
They can sign up there to endorse the bid and join this effort. And then the second is they may want to go to the App Store. We encourage them to go to the App Store and download a new app called We Are 8, which provides folks with an experience that's going to be similar, but a model that's very different. And it's built on giving individuals and giving communities more control, giving them a slice of the economics, and they're coming on to our infrastructure now. And we think it's going to be an important cornerstone, again, of the upgraded internet that we're describing.
And we'll put a link on that, link for that as well on the show notes. So thank you to Micah for that. And I wish the best of luck to you. I hope the TikTok thing works out in your favor. And if you end up running TikTok, just all I have is one request, is that you just make me more popular than I currently am. Just, tweak the algorithm to be as open as possible, but always feed the Today in Tech show subtly or unsubtly. I don't care how you do it.
We hope that a new and reimagined TikTok will elevate all forms of good content.
There you go.
So
I'm
sure you have nothing to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I've been hesitant on doing a lot of stuff on TikTok because of a lot of the ownership issues.
Yeah.
So I'd be fully in favor of making me internet famous. Through great conversations about tech and none of this goofy stuff where I have to dance or anything like that.
Brilliant.
All right, Tamika Tillemann, thanks again for joining the show, and good luck to you.
Great spending time with you. Thank you.
Yep. That's all the time we have for today's episode. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.